Is it harder to buy a house now than it was in the 90s?
My perception of buying a house in the 20th century, all of it, would be that it's pretty easy.
I feel like it was very easy and simple, and it was, I have this money, I want to get a property, and it was very easy to do.
Everything was cheaper. The whole thing was more simple, more easy, cheaper.
Property prices are a lot higher than they were back then, but as our earnings, it came with its own hardships, definitely.
When I bought my first home in 1993, it was considered one of the cheapest times to get on the ladder. One thing that helped was not having as much to spend our money on. Hardly anyone I knew took foreign holidays or had weekend breaks, and they certainly weren't buying barista coffee every day. You only had a mobile if you were in sales and your company provided one. There was no internet or TV streaming services. Overall, there was a lot less pressure on people to spend so much on daily living, and it was easier to save. But prior to the late 80s, fixed-rate mortgages weren't as common as they are today. And between February and November 1990, interest rates hit an all-time high of 15.4%. Compare that to the long-term fixed rates of 2 to 3% that buyers have access to today.
Regarding interest rates, I know that mine's quite low, so I think it's something like 2.47%. And I know from discussions with the other generation that it was a lot higher back in the 90s.
I think people have the misconception that because you could get a 100% mortgage, that was brilliant. But, you know, you look at interest rates, you know, we were paying interest rates of 10%.
Why are we always saying that we need this massive deposit then and panicking if the interest rates are actually that much lower now? Because yes, it might cost more to actually get on the property ladder, but once you're in, you're actually in a much better position than you would have been 20 years ago.
Weren't mortgage payments cheaper in the 90s? Well, according to Nationwide, in the 90s, first-time buyers in the UK spent, on average, around 50% of their net annual income on mortgage payments. That's a big hit to the wallet of any first-time buyer, then or now. For some, it was unsustainable and meant owning a home wasn't always quite the dream it was made out to be.
Buying in the 90s, you know, there was a lot of financial pressure on people. It was a huge amount of your income. Between the two of us, probably £1,400 a month, something like that, we probably had, of which our mortgage payment was £400 a month. Although it sounds a small amount in today's terms, it was quite a big chunk of our income. Some friends of ours did ultimately split up because of it, because there was a differential in their income. They got to the end of the month, one owed the other money, he insisted on having it back, she couldn't afford to give it him, it bounced out of her payment, and ultimately their relationship paid the price. It put them under that much pressure.
With regards to sort of monthly payments, I don't think that necessarily has changed that much. I know with the product that I've chosen, it's a brilliant deal, and I don't feel like I'm paying much more than they would have done back then. It is just perhaps the deposit side of things that has changed, having to have that bulk sum before you actually do start purchasing your first property.
Buying a property in the early 90s, I think a lot of people nowadays maybe think it was easy because lenders are now tighter in terms of income restrictions and, you know, properly checking out the affordability. But arguably that's the right thing to do, because a lot of people were sort of getting into it and really finding that they couldn't afford it once they got in and being forced to, you know, move out, sell the property.
And this wasn't uncommon for home buyers in the 90s. During the major property recession that hit between 1990 and 95, around 345,200 people had their homes repossessed. Compare that to the last recession between 2008 and 2012, when 198,600 homes were repossessed. That's 40% fewer homeowners losing their home, even in one of our worst markets. Buying a home is a big commitment. Today it's harder to save for a deposit, but in the past, mortgage rates were a lot higher. However, today, once you're on the ladder, you're less likely to lose your home. You just need to find a way to tackle the thing most first-time buyers today are struggling with, pulling together that initial deposit. Guess what? It could be easier to get there than people tell you.
I think buying a house now compared to 20 years ago would be much easier. I think there's a lot more out there, a lot more help, a lot more variety, especially if you are using a mortgage broker. I think if the interest rates now were the same as what they were back then, it would have put me into major panic mode, more so than just putting the deposit together, because you would have thought, right, well, I've got this deposit to put together, but then once I'm in the house, gosh, how much is that going to cost? Because there's going to be obviously interest on the monthly repayments and things. So it would have definitely put me off more had the interest rates not been as they are now. I would have been a lot more nervous about it, I think.
It certainly seems that you need more of a deposit. You probably couldn't get 100% mortgage nowadays, but I think in terms of your schemes available to help you onto the property ladder are more prevalent than they were back in the 90s. In some ways I think it seems harder because of the need for a deposit, stamp duty, things like that. But I think there's a lot. I do think there's a lot more help out there.